No one remembered arriving. Not the way people remember driving home, boarding a train, or waking from sleep. Memory simply stopped. The last thing Mara recalled was the rain. She had been walking through a deserted parking lot after finishing the night shift at a hospital. The streetlights flickered behind the curtain of water, and every reflection looked like another person following her. Then darkness. Not unconsciousness. Just absence. When she opened her eyes, she was standing inside a forest unlike any she had ever seen. The trees rose impossibly high, their trunks black as burned bones. Thick gray fog drifted between them, swallowing everything more than a few meters away. The air smelled damp, mixed with rust and something sweet that had begun to rot. Silence. Not peaceful silence. Listening silence. The kind that made every heartbeat sound like an intruder. Mara. She spun. A young man stepped through the fog, breathing hard. "I know you?" she asked. "I don't think so. My name's Eli." He looked as frightened as she felt. Moments later another figure appeared. A woman in her late 30s wearing a torn business suit. She clutched her arm as though expecting to find an injury that wasn't there. "I'm Nora." Her voice trembled. "I'm not supposed to be here." None of them were. The fourth survivor arrived minutes later. A tall mechanic named Owen, his hands stained permanently with oil that no amount of washing had ever removed. "Tell me one of you called an ambulance," he muttered. No one answered. The forest answered instead. Metal groaned somewhere beyond the trees. Not loudly. Slowly. As if an enormous machine had awakened after centuries of sleep. Then. A single scream echoed through the fog. It lasted only 3 seconds. But it ended too suddenly. Like someone had cut the sound in half. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. What was that? Nora whispered. No one wanted to answer. Because everyone already knew. Someone had died. Or something far worse. The four strangers wandered together through the endless woods. Every direction looked exactly the same. Dead trees. Rotting leaves. Heavy fog. Broken fences disappearing into nothingness. It felt less like a forest and more like an enormous prison pretending to be nature. Eventually they discovered an abandoned farm. The wooden buildings leaned sideways, ready to collapse. Rusted farming equipment lay scattered like skeletons. Chains hung from beams although there was nothing to hold. The silence felt intentional. As though the place was waiting for them to make the first mistake. Eli noticed it first. "What is that?" Near the center of the farm stood a strange machine. Old. Industrial. Covered in wires and pipes. 6 pistons rose from its sides like iron ribs. A cracked pressure gauge twitched even though nothing powered it. The machine looked impossible. Like several different engines had been melted together into something alive. Owen approached carefully. "I'm a mechanic. I've never seen anything like this." He brushed dirt from the metal. The instant his fingers touched it. The machine coughed. The pistons jerked violently. A shower of orange sparks exploded upward. Everyone stumbled back. The sound echoed across the forest. Then. Silence again. Mara stared into the fog. "I think." She swallowed. "I think something heard that." The first crow landed nearby. Then another. Then dozens. They watched without making a sound. Every bird faced exactly the same direction. Toward the trees. Toward something walking through them. Crunch. 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 Slow footsteps. Too heavy to belong to any animal. The survivors froze. Nobody spoke. Nobody blinked. Between the trees appeared a silhouette. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dragging something metallic behind it. The figure walked without urgency. As though escape wasn't possible. As though time itself belonged to it. The fog hid every detail except two things. A rusted blade. And a pale mask with no expression. No eyes. No mouth. Only darkness where a face should have been. The killer stopped. Its head tilted slightly. Listening. Not seeing. Listening. Mara realized the horrifying truth. It wasn't searching randomly. It had heard the generator. And now. It knew they existed. Run. The word never needed to be spoken. All four survivors scattered. Branches slapped Mara's face. Roots grabbed her boots. Behind her came the steady footsteps. Not faster. Not slower. Always the same. Crunch. 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 Like death walking at a comfortable pace. She dared one glance backward. The masked figure hadn't hurried. Yet somehow. It was closer. Much closer. Impossible. The distance between them had shrunk without the killer ever running. Panic distorted reality. Mara ducked through a broken barn. The inside smelled of mold and dried blood. She crouched beneath collapsed wooden boards. Her breathing echoed inside her skull. Don't breathe. Don't move. Don't think. Outside. Crunch. 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 The footsteps stopped. Right outside. Silence. Then. The sound of slow breathing. Not hers. His. The killer stood only inches away on the other side of the wall. Mara squeezed both hands over her mouth until her jaw hurt. A single tear rolled down her cheek. The breathing continued. Patient. Almost curious. Then. The footsteps resumed. Crunch. 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 They faded into the fog. She waited. 1 minute. 5 minutes. 10. Only when her legs became numb did she crawl outside. The forest was empty again. Or pretending to be. As darkness deepened, the survivors reunited near the silent generator. Owen looked pale. I saw him. So did we, Eli answered. No. Owen shook his head violently. I mean after I lost him. He wasn't chasing me anymore. He was just, standing there. Looking at a tree. Nora frowned. Looking. He doesn't have eyes. I know. Owen's voice cracked. But somehow. He was smiling. Nobody asked how he knew. Because deep inside. They all. Understood. The mask had never been the face. Something much older. Much crueler. Was hiding underneath. A distant metallic roar shattered the silence. Somewhere else in the endless forest. Another generator had come alive. And something answered with a scream that was almost human. The night had only just begun. Morning never came. The sky remained the same endless shade of bruised gray, as if dawn had been erased from existence. No bird sang. No wind stirred the dead branches. Time had become meaningless, measured only by heartbeats and fear. Mara hadn't slept. None of them had. Every time one of them closed their eyes, they heard footsteps circling just beyond the fog. Crunch. 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 Always at the same slow pace. Always stopping just before they could see who, or what, was making them. No one spoke about it. Some things became more terrifying when spoken aloud. We can't hide forever, Owen finally said. His voice sounded rough from exhaustion. If that machine really attracted him, maybe fixing all of them does something. Or maybe it kills us faster, Nora replied. What other choice do we have? Eli asked quietly. No one answered. There wasn't another choice. Standing still felt dangerous. Running blindly felt worse. Doing nothing meant waiting for the masked killer to find them. They decided to search the farm for more of the strange generators. The fog swallowed them almost immediately. Every tree looked identical. Every path somehow led back to broken fences and abandoned buildings. It was as if the forest was rearranging itself while they weren't looking. An hour later, Mara noticed something hanging from a dead oak tree. At first she thought it was old farming equipment. Then she stepped closer. Her stomach twisted. It was a hook. A gigantic iron hook. Rust covered its surface, but the point gleamed as if freshly sharpened. Beneath it, the ground was stained black. Not mud. Not oil. Old blood. Hundreds of flies buzzed around it despite the cold air. Nora whispered, who would build something like this? Owen reached toward the hook. The instant his fingers came close, the hook trembled. A wet cracking sound echoed through the forest. Something deep beneath the ground shifted. Almost like something below had awakened. Owen snatched his hand back. We're leaving. No one argued. As they hurried away, Mara kept glancing behind her. The hook remained perfectly still. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it had been watching them. Not the hook itself. Something connected to it. Something hidden beneath the earth. They found another generator beside an abandoned slaughterhouse. Its brick walls were covered with faded handprints. Thousands of them. Large. Small. Children's. Adults. Some looked as though whoever made them had been dragged downward while pressing against the wall. Eli stared. Why would anyone? His sentence stopped. Because the handprints were moving. Not crawling. Sliding. Slowly. As though invisible hands were making fresh prints from inside the walls. Mara blinked. The movement stopped. Had she imagined it? She wasn't sure anymore. This has to work, Owen muttered. He knelt beside the generator. I think I understand part of it. You've never seen one before. I know. But somehow. He frowned. My hands remember. That sentence frightened Mara more than she expected. His hands remember. How? Owen tightened a bolt. Eli connected loose wires. Nora turned a rusted valve. The machine rattled violently. Steam burst into the air. Metal screamed. Then. Boom. A burst of sparks exploded across the clearing. The generator roared to life. Its pistons pumped rhythmically. For one glorious second. Nothing happened. Then the forest answered. Far away. A long metallic horn echoed through the trees. The sound wasn't made by any animal. It sounded like a factory announcing the beginning of eternal suffering. Everyone froze. He heard it, Mara whispered. The crows exploded into the air. Hundreds of black wings filled the sky. Then. Crunch. 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 The footsteps had returned. Closer than before. Much closer. They ran. The slaughterhouse door slammed behind Mara as she stumbled inside. Dust floated through broken sunlight that didn't belong there. Rusted meat hooks swung gently from the ceiling. Some still held strips of rotten flesh. The smell nearly made her vomit. She ducked beneath a conveyor belt and held her breath. Outside. Silence. No footsteps. No breathing. Nothing. Maybe they had escaped. Then. Tap. Something struck the window. Tap. 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 Mara slowly looked up. The masked killer stood outside. Motionless. One gloved finger tapped against the filthy glass. Tap. 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 His head tilted slightly. Not threatening. Curious. Like a scientist studying an insect. Then he slowly raised the enormous rusted blade. Crash. Glass exploded inward. Mara screamed. She sprinted deeper into the slaughterhouse while heavy footsteps echoed behind her. The killer wasn't rushing. He never rushed. Yet every time she looked back, he was closer. Closer than logic allowed. The corridors twisted unnaturally. Doors opened into rooms that hadn't existed seconds earlier. Hallways stretched longer every time she ran through them. The building itself was changing. Trying to trap her. She burst through a side door and nearly collided with Nora. Mara. This way. Together they squeezed through a narrow gap beneath fallen timber. The opening was too small for the killer. At least. It should have been. The masked figure stopped on the other side. Completely still. Seconds passed. Then something impossible happened. Bones cracked beneath the mask. Shoulders twisted. Arms bent at impossible angles. With slow, wet sounds. The killer began folding himself to fit through the opening. Not because he needed to. Because he wanted them to watch. Nora shrieked. Run! They escaped into the woods. The killer did not follow immediately. Instead, from somewhere inside the slaughterhouse, came laughter. Not loud. Not human. It sounded like dozens of whispers laughing together. Hours later, the four survivors found one another again. Eli was bleeding from a cut across his shoulder. I didn't even feel him hit me. Owen examined the wound. His face turned pale. There isn't any blood. What? Everyone looked closer. The wound was open. Deep. But instead of blood, black ash slowly drifted from it into the air. What is happening to me? Eli whispered. No one answered. Because they were all beginning to notice something else. They were forgetting things. Mara could no longer remember her mother's face. Nora had forgotten the name of the city where she grew up. Owen couldn't remember how old he was. The forest wasn't only hunting them. It was eating them. Piece by piece. Not their bodies. Their memories. And somewhere beyond the fog, the masked killer stood beside another iron hook, waiting patiently for the moment they would have nothing left to remember except fear. Eli was the first to notice it. He could still remember being afraid. He could remember running. He could remember the sound of the killer's footsteps. But when he tried to remember his own childhood, there was only fog. Not blurred memories. Nothing. Like someone had taken a knife and cut whole years out of his life. My sister. He whispered. The others looked at him. I know I had one. I know she existed. But. His face went pale. I can't remember her name. Silence settled over the group. No one admitted it at first. But they were all losing pieces of themselves. Mara could no longer remember the color of her father's eyes. Nora had forgotten her own birthday. Owen couldn't remember why he had become a mechanic. It wasn't ordinary forgetting. The memories didn't fade. They vanished. As if they had never existed. They found shelter inside the ruins of an old school buried deep within the forest. Its classrooms were frozen in time. Rotting desks stood in perfect rows. Dust covered broken chalkboards. Children's drawings still hung crookedly on cracked walls. Every picture showed the same thing. A forest. A gray sky. A tall figure wearing a pale mask. None of the drawings were signed. Yet every one had been made in a different style. Different handwriting. Different ages. Different children. All drawing the same nightmare. This place, Nora whispered, has been here a long time. No, Mara replied quietly. I think we've only just found it. The school library was strangely untouched. Books filled every shelf. But their titles made no sense. How to Forget Your Name. The Weight of Fear. People Who Never Escaped. One thick black book lay open on a table. Its pages were completely blank. Until Mara stepped closer. Words slowly appeared. Not written. Growing. Like ink rising through paper. Mara Holloway. Her heart stopped. That was her name. Beneath it, another sentence formed. Age, forgotten. More words appeared. Mother's voice, removed. Favorite song, removed. Last happy memory, removed. The ink continued spreading across the page. Listing memories she had already lost. Mara. Owen grabbed her shoulder. The words disappeared instantly. When he looked down, the page was blank again. What happened? She couldn't answer. Because one terrible thought had entered her mind. If something was writing down what had been taken, then something was keeping those memories. A loud metallic clang echoed outside. Everyone froze. Not footsteps. Something else. They carefully looked through a cracked window. The killer stood in the school courtyard. Motionless. Before him stood one of the massive iron hooks. Dangling from it was a backpack. Old. Blue. Covered in cartoon rockets. No body. Just the backpack. It swayed gently. Mara frowned. Why would he? Then Eli gasped. That's mine. Everyone turned. My school bag. His voice trembled. I haven't seen it since I was 12. But. He pressed both hands against his head. I don't remember anything about school. The backpack wasn't random. It belonged to him. Or had. The killer slowly removed the backpack from the hook. He opened it. Reached inside. Pulled out. Nothing. His empty hand closed as though holding something invisible. Then he pressed that invisible thing against his chest. The mask tilted upward. Almost, satisfied. Eli suddenly collapsed. He screamed. Not in pain. In confusion. My name. What is my name? The others stared in horror. Eli. Mara shouted. He looked at her with frightened eyes. Who is Eli? The killer vanished into the fog. The backpack remained hanging from the hook. Empty. Meaningless. Like it had never belonged to anyone. They dragged Eli into another classroom. He recognized none of them. He remembered only one thing. The killer. Nothing else survived. His past had been stolen. Hours passed before Eli spoke again. I keep hearing whispers. What whispers? Nora asked. They're saying names. Whose names? I don't know. They disappear before I understand them. Mara realized the whispers weren't outside. They were inside his head. Calling to memories that no longer existed. Determined to escape, the group searched the school for another generator. They eventually found one beneath the gymnasium. The basement smelled damp. Chains hung from the ceiling. Dozens of cracked mirrors lined the walls. Every reflection behaved differently. Mara's reflection blinked when she didn't. Nora's smiled. Owen's reflection looked terrified. Eli had no reflection at all. Owen knelt beside the generator. "We don't have time." Together they began repairing it. Bolts tightened. Pipes connected. Steam hissed. The machine shook violently. Then it roared to life. The lights in the basement flickered. Every mirror shattered at once. Thousands of glass fragments rained across the floor. Inside each broken piece, someone was screaming. Not reflections. People. Different faces trapped inside every shard. Some old. Some young. All whispering the same words. "Don't let him remember you." Then the glass turned black. Crunch. 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 The footsteps echoed from upstairs. Slow. Patient. Coming closer. The survivors ran through the basement corridors. Behind them, lockers slammed shut one after another. Bang. 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 Each door closing by itself. Each impact closer than the last. The footsteps never changed speed. They didn't need to. The school itself guided the killer. Hallways stretched. Staircases moved. Doors disappeared. The building wanted them caught. They burst outside into the forest. The killer stood waiting. Not chasing. Waiting. As if he had known exactly where they would emerge. He slowly lifted one gloved hand. Pointing, not at them, but at Eli. Eli froze. His face became strangely calm. "I know him," he whispered. "No, you don't." Mara shouted. "I do. He isn't trying to kill us. He wants." Eli smiled faintly. "To give something back." The others stared in horror. His eyes looked empty. Like someone else's thoughts had slipped inside him. The killer extended his hand farther. Inviting him. Eli took one step forward. Then another. Mara grabbed his arm just before he reached the masked figure. The moment she pulled him back, Eli screamed. Black ash poured from his mouth instead of breath. The killer lowered his hand. Turned away. And disappeared once more into the endless fog. That night, as the survivors hid among the dead trees, Mara realized the truth that chilled her more than any chase. The killer didn't simply hunt people. He harvested them. Not their bodies. Not even their lives. He collected who they were. One memory at a time. Until nothing remained except an empty shell, waiting willingly for the next iron hook. The forest had become quieter. Not because the danger had passed. Because something was missing. Eli no longer spoke unless someone asked him a direct question. Even then, his answers were short, distant, and hollow. He still walked with the group, repaired generators, and ran when the killer appeared, but there was no fear in his eyes anymore. Fear required something to lose. Eli had almost nothing left. "We need one more generator," Owen whispered as they crouched behind the remains of a collapsed windmill. His hands shook while tightening a loose bolt he had found on the ground. "After that, maybe an exit opens." "Maybe," Nora replied. "We keep saying maybe." No one corrected her. Hope had become a dangerous habit. The windmill overlooked a valley hidden beneath layers of fog. At its center stood dozens of iron hooks. Not scattered. Arranged. Perfectly. Like seats in an audience. Each hook held something different. A torn jacket. A cracked watch. A child's stuffed rabbit. A wedding ring hanging from a thin chain. Objects left behind by people who were no longer here. Or worse. People who no longer remembered those objects had ever belonged to them. Mara stared at the stuffed rabbit. For just a second, she felt an overwhelming sadness. Then the feeling disappeared. She couldn't explain why. A voice broke the silence. "You're late." The four survivors spun around. Standing beside the windmill was a young woman wearing a dark green hoodie stained with dirt. Her hair was uneven, as if she had cut it herself with a dull knife. She looked exhausted. But alive. "You." Nora whispered. "Another survivor?" The woman smiled weakly. "I think. My name is Iris. At least. I think that's my name." For the first time since arriving in the forest, they weren't alone. It should have been comforting. Instead, Mara felt uneasy. "How long have you been here?" Owen asked. "I don't know. Days? Years? I can't tell anymore. The sky never changes. The forest doesn't let you count." She looked toward Eli. Her expression darkened. He already started forgetting. "You can tell?" Mara asked. Iris nodded. "The ones who forget stop blinking as much." Everyone looked at Eli. She was right. His eyes remained open far too long. Almost like he had forgotten how. Iris led them through a maze of broken stone walls toward an abandoned chapel. Its roof had collapsed. Its stained glass windows had shattered long ago. Only the altar remained untouched. Resting on it was an old photograph. 5 people stood smiling beside a lake. 4 of the faces had been scratched away. Only one remained. Iris. She picked up the photograph carefully. "I found this weeks ago. I think. These were my friends." Her fingers trembled. "I don't remember any of them. They're gone. But I don't know if they escaped. Or if I simply forgot they ever existed." She folded the picture and placed it inside her pocket. "It gets easier." "No," Mara said firmly. "It doesn't." Iris looked at her with tired eyes. "That's the worst part. It does." The chapel bell rang. Once. The sound echoed across the forest. Nobody had touched it. Iris's face turned pale. "We have to leave. Now." The footsteps began immediately. Crunch. 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 Closer than ever before. The killer wasn't approaching. He was already there. Standing between the trees. Watching. Waiting. The pale mask reflected almost no light. His rusted blade rested against one shoulder. Motionless. Patient. As though he already knew the ending. The survivors ran. The forest twisted around them. Paths became walls of thorns. Trees bent across trails like closing jaws. Mara lost sight of everyone. Eli. Nora. Owen. Iris. Only silence answered. Then. "I found a generator." It was Iris's voice. Mara followed the sound into an abandoned warehouse. Inside, Iris was already working on another generator. "This one's almost fixed." Together they tightened pipes and reconnected wires. The machine coughed. Shook violently. Then roared to life. The warehouse lights flickered. One by one. Until every bulb glowed a sickly yellow. Something stood at the far end of the room. Not the killer. A person. Facing the wall. Perfectly still. Iris. Mara whispered. "Who's that?" "I don't know." The figure slowly turned around. Mara froze. It was Iris. Same face. Same clothes. Same tired eyes. The second Iris smiled. You came back. The real Iris stepped backward. No. No. The copy tilted its head. You left me here. I waited. I remembered. You forgot. I had to become you. The lights exploded. Darkness swallowed the warehouse. Footsteps echoed from every direction. Not one pair. Dozens. Crunch. 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 The killer walked somewhere among them. Or perhaps all of them. Mara grabbed Iris's hand and ran blindly. Behind them, two identical voices screamed. Mara! Help me! One belonged to the real Iris. The other didn't. She didn't dare look back. They burst outside. Owen and Nora were waiting near a broken fence. Eli's gone, Nora cried. What? He walked into the fog. We chased him. He disappeared. Mara looked at Iris. Only then did she notice something strange. The photograph was gone from Iris's pocket. When did you lose it? Lose what? The picture. Iris frowned. What picture? Mara's blood ran cold. You showed it to us. No, Iris replied softly. I've never had a photograph. Before anyone could speak again, a figure emerged from the fog. Eli. He walked slowly toward them. No wounds. No panic. No expression. His eyes looked empty. Completely empty. Around his neck hung a small iron key. The gate. He whispered. I know where it is. Hope flickered across Nora's face. You found it? Eli smiled. It wasn't his smile. It's waiting. So is he. Behind Eli. The masked killer stepped silently from the fog. He rested one hand on Eli's shoulder. Eli didn't resist. He didn't run. He didn't even blink. The killer wasn't holding him captive. Eli had chosen to stand beside him. Then, for the first time, the killer spoke. His voice was calm, deep, and disturbingly human. There are only 4 survivors. He looked directly at Iris. So tell me. Who invited the 5th? No one moved. The killer's words lingered in the cold air like smoke. There are only 4 survivors. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Mara looked at Iris. Then at Nora. Then Owen. Then Eli, standing peacefully beside the masked killer. There were 5 of them. There had always been 5. Hadn't there? Her thoughts stumbled over themselves. She tried to remember the moment Iris had appeared. She could remember seeing her. Hearing her voice. Following her to the chapel. But strangely, she couldn't remember where Iris had come from. It was as though the memory had been stitched into her mind afterward. A memory that fit. But wasn't real. The killer slowly removed his hand from Eli's shoulder. Eli remained standing exactly where he was, smiling faintly. The masked figure raised one finger. And pointed directly at Iris. Not with anger. With recognition. You don't belong, he said. His voice was almost gentle. Iris's face turned white. You don't know what you're talking about. No. The killer tilted his head. Then tell them your last name. Silence. Iris opened her mouth. Nothing came out. My. She frowned. She couldn't remember. Tell them where you were born. No answer. Tell them your mother's face. Iris squeezed her eyes shut. I can't. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I can't remember. The killer nodded slowly. Exactly. Mara stepped in front of Iris. She's forgetting like the rest of us. No. The killer's voice remained calm. She is not forgetting. She has nothing to remember. A cold feeling spread through Mara's chest. No. That wasn't possible. The killer reached into the pocket of his long black coat. He pulled out the photograph. The same photograph Iris had insisted she never owned. He held it up. Four smiling friends stood beside a lake. Not 5. 4. There had never been an Iris. The empty space beside them looked wrong. As if someone had forced another person into the picture. Then erased them. The photograph burst into black ash. The wind carried it away. Iris staggered backward. No. No. Her voice sounded different now. Not deeper. Not louder. Just crowded. As though several people were speaking through the same mouth. You shouldn't have shown them. She wasn't looking at the survivors. She was looking at the killer. The killer finally lifted his rusted blade. I warned you. The ground shook. The fog thickened instantly. The trees groaned. Every crow in the forest screamed together. Iris screamed too. But her scream changed halfway through. Human. Then animal. Then something that sounded like twisting metal. Her body bent backward. Bones cracked beneath her skin. Her arms lengthened. Her fingers stretched into impossible shapes. Her smile widened far beyond what any face should allow. Her eyes split open. Not into two. Into dozens. Tiny blinking eyes appeared beneath her skin, staring in every direction. Nora fell to her knees. Oh God! The thing wearing. Iris laughed. You still think you're survivors. It took one step forward. Its feet didn't touch the ground. It floated. Only inches. Enough to feel wrong. I found your fear. I wore it. I became someone you wanted to trust. Its voice shifted constantly. Sometimes Iris. Sometimes a child. Sometimes Eli. Sometimes Mara herself. I almost convinced you. Without warning. It lunged. Not toward the killer. Toward Nora. Mara shoved Nora aside just as the creature's claws tore through the air. Wood splintered. Stone cracked. The thing shrieked in frustration. The killer watched without moving. Almost. Waiting. Run! Owen shouted. The survivors scattered into the forest once more. Now two monsters hunted them. One who walked. One who floated. The fog became alive. Faces emerged from it. Whispering. Begging. Some begged for help. Others begged to be forgotten. Branches reached like skeletal hands. The trees no longer looked like trees. They resembled towering human bodies fused together, their bark hiding thousands of silent faces. The forest had never been made of wood. It had been made of people. Mara and Owen stumbled into an abandoned railway station. Rusted tracks vanished into darkness. An old ticket booth stood open. Inside lay a notebook. Every page contained names. Hundreds. Thousands. Each one crossed out. Except for Mara. Nora. Owen. Eli. Below them. Fresh ink slowly appeared. A fifth name began writing itself. Not Iris. Something else. The letters twisted unnaturally, changing before Mara could read them. The notebook suddenly slammed shut. A terrible scream echoed through the station. Nora. Mara ran toward the sound. She found Nora trapped beneath fallen beams. The floating creature hovered above her. Its body kept changing. Every few seconds it became someone different. A crying child. An old woman. A frightened man. Then Iris again. "Help me," it whispered. "I'm still here. I don't want to die." Mara hesitated. For only 1 second. That was enough. The creature smiled. "You believed me." Its arm shot forward like a spear. Before it reached Mara. Thud. The rusted blade crashed through its chest. The killer stood behind it. The creature shrieked with dozens of voices. Black smoke poured from the wound. It glared at the killer with pure hatred. "You protect them?" The killer answered quietly. "No. I protect the rules." With one violent pull, he ripped the blade free. The creature dissolved into thousands of black moths that scattered into the fog. Silence returned. The killer looked at Mara. Then at Nora. Then Owen. Finally. At Eli. Eli still stood beside him without emotion. The killer reached up. And removed his pale mask. For the briefest instant, Mara saw what lay beneath. There was no face. Only endless darkness. Inside that darkness, she saw countless human faces floating silently, their mouths open in eternal screams. Among them, she recognized Eli's. And for a heartbeat, she thought she saw her own. The killer put the mask back on. "You have one trial left," he said. "Repair the final generator. Open the gate. And decide." His voice became almost sorrowful. "Which one of you is willing to be remembered?" Then he disappeared into the fog. Far away, somewhere deep in the endless forest, the last generator roared to life on its own. And the exit gate slowly began to unlock. The horn echoed through the forest. Once. Twice. Then it fell silent. Somewhere beyond the fog, enormous gears had begun to turn. Metal groaned beneath the earth, and the ground trembled with a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. The exit gate was opening. Or pretending to. Mara looked around. Only 3 people stood beside her. Nora. Owen. And Eli. Although calling Eli a survivor no longer felt right. He stood perfectly still, his empty eyes fixed on the distant forest. He neither blinked nor breathed deeply. He looked like a man waiting for instructions only he could hear. "The gate," he whispered. "It knows we're coming." They followed the sound of grinding machinery. The forest grew stranger with every step. The trees became taller, their bark covered with names carved into the wood. Some were centuries old. Others were fresh. Mara stopped. One name caught her eye. Mara Holloway. Beneath it was today's date. She touched the carving. The bark felt warm. Like living skin. Instantly, a memory flooded back into her mind. Her mother laughing while baking bread. The smell of cinnamon. A warm kitchen. Sunlight through a window. It lasted only a second. Then it was gone again. The name on the tree slowly faded until only rough bark remained. The forest wasn't just stealing memories. It was storing them. Beyond the trees stood the exit gate. It was enormous. 2 rusted iron doors rose nearly 30 feet into the air, bound together by chains as thick as tree trunks. Above the gate hung 4 hooks. Not empty. Each held a weathered lantern. Only one lantern was lit. 3 remained dark. What does that mean? Nora whispered. No one answered. Beside the gate stood the final generator. Unlike the others, it looked almost new. Its metal gleamed beneath the gray sky. It hummed softly, as though it had been waiting for them all along. Owen knelt beside it. This is it. If this works. He didn't finish the sentence. Hope had become too fragile to speak aloud. Together, Mara and Owen began repairing the machine. Bolts tightened. Belts turned. Steam hissed. The generator sputtered. Once. Twice. Then. The entire forest screamed. Not one voice. Thousands. The sound rolled across the trees like a tidal wave. Every lantern above the gate burst into flame. All 4. The chains rattled violently. The great doors shuddered. Slowly. They began to open. Fresh air drifted through the widening gap. Warm. Clean. Filled with the scent of rain. The first normal smell any of them had experienced since arriving. Nora cried. We did it. But Eli didn't move. He kept staring at the opening. I don't remember that place. Mara grabbed his shoulders. You don't have to. We're going home. Eli smiled sadly. I don't know what home is. The killer emerged from the fog. He walked with the same calm, measured steps. Crunch. 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 He stopped a few yards from the gate. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't attack. Instead, he looked at the open doorway. Beyond the forest. Then back at the survivors. You may leave, he said. His voice was strangely gentle. But only those who still exist. Nora frowned. What does that mean? The killer lifted one gloved hand toward the open gate. Walk through. Owen stepped forward first. Without hesitation, he crossed the threshold. The moment he touched the light, his body froze. Tiny cracks spread across his skin. Not wounds. Fractures. Like porcelain. No. Mara whispered. Owen looked at his hands in horror. I can't remember. His body crumbled silently into gray ash. The wind carried every piece away. Nothing remained. Not even footprints. Nora screamed. No. She ran through the gate. For one hopeful heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then she simply stopped existing. No scream. No body. No ash. One moment she was there. The next. The empty road beyond the gate stretched into the distance as though she had never been born. Mara staggered backward. What did you do? The killer remained motionless. I did nothing. The gate cannot return what has already been taken. She looked toward Eli. He hadn't reacted. Almost peacefully, he walked toward the killer instead of the gate. I remember you, Eli whispered. The killer nodded. Yes. You are the last thing you remember. Eli closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were completely empty. He dissolved into black mist that drifted beneath the killer's mask. Gone. Without pain. Without fear. Only Mara remained. The forest became silent. The wind stopped. Even the fog stood still. You've been lying, Mara said quietly. There was never any escape. The killer answered after a long pause. There is. 4-1. He pointed toward the final lit lantern. One memory. One life. One survivor. The forest always keeps the rest. Mara's heart pounded. She understood. The 4 lanterns had never represented 4 survivors. They represented 4 identities. Only one could leave complete. The others had already been consumed long before reaching the gate. She stepped closer to the opening. Warm sunlight waited beyond it. She could almost hear distant traffic. Birds. Children laughing. Life. Then she noticed something strange. On the other side of the gate. People walked past without seeing her. Cars drove by. Clouds drifted overhead. The world continued normally. No one was searching for the missing. No news reports. No police. Nothing. It was as though the 4 survivors had disappeared years ago. Or had never existed at all. The killer stood silently behind her. "Choose," he said. Mara looked at the open gate. Then back at the endless forest. Something inside the darkness whispered her name. Not with malice. With familiarity. She realized one final, terrifying truth. The forest wasn't trying to keep her body. It wanted permission to keep her. And for the first time since waking in the fog. Mara wasn't certain which side of the gate was real. She took one slow step forward. The world. Beyond the gate smiled. The forest behind her breathed. And somewhere, hidden beneath the killer's pale mask, countless forgotten voices began whispering the same question. Who will remember you, if you leave? Mara stood between 2 worlds. Ahead of her lay the open gate. Blue sky. Warm sunlight. The distant hum of traffic. A life that felt impossibly real. Behind her stretched the endless forest. Gray fog. Dead trees. Rusted hooks. The silent killer. Neither place called to her. Both waited. The killer spoke only once. Choose. His voice carried no threat. No command. Only certainty. Mara closed her eyes. She searched for something, anything, that still belonged to her. A face. A birthday. A favorite song. Nothing came. Only one memory remained. The rain. The parking lot. A shadow following her. The moment before everything disappeared. That memory had survived every trial. Why? She opened her eyes. I don't think I was taken from my world. The killer did not answer. I think. She whispered, I died that night. Silence. Then the killer inclined his head by the smallest amount. Not agreement. Not denial. Just acknowledgement. Mara laughed. It wasn't joyful. It was the exhausted laugh of someone who had finally stopped lying to herself. There was never a way back. No, the killer replied. There was only a way forward. The gate flickered. The bright road beyond it shimmered like a reflection on disturbed water. The people walking outside repeated the same movements. The same woman crossed the street. The same child chased the same red balloon. The same bus drove past. Again. And again. And again. It wasn't the real world. It was a memory of one. A perfect imitation built from stolen lives. The exit wasn't freedom. It was oblivion. Anyone who walked through it would dissolve into a world that could never remember them. Mara turned away from the gate. I'm not going. The killer lowered his blade. For the first time. Someone has refused. The forest trembled. The ground split open. From beneath the earth rose the iron hooks. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. They formed a vast circle around Mara and the killer. Every hook held a ghostly figure suspended in the air. Men. Women. Children. Old. Young. Their bodies were transparent, but their eyes were open. Watching. Waiting. Among them stood Owen. Nora. Eli. Not alive. Not dead. Fragments. The parts of them the forest had kept. Mara walked toward Nora. I'm sorry. Nora smiled faintly. I remember your name. It was the first time anyone had spoken it without hesitation. Owen looked at her. I remember fixing engines. Eli whispered. I remember my sister. As each memory returned, their forms became brighter. Not whole. But stronger. The killer watched silently. What are they? Mara asked. They are what remains, he answered. The forest feeds on forgotten lives. It cannot consume what is remembered. Mara finally understood. The forest had never been unstoppable. It survived because every victim eventually forgot themselves. Memory was resistance. Identity was rebellion. The killer had never created the prison. He had merely enforced its rules. She looked at him. Who are you? 4. The first time. The killer removed his mask willingly. There was no darkness beneath it now. Only a tired human face. Ancient. Scarred. His eyes held centuries of grief. I was the first. The first survivor. He nodded. I failed. I forgot my own name. So the forest gave me another purpose. I became its keeper. Not because I wanted to. Because I could no longer remember wanting anything else. A single tear rolled down his weathered face. I've worn this mask so long. I no longer know what I looked like. Mara stepped closer. What was your name? The old man closed his eyes. His lips trembled. Nothing came. He truly did not know. Without thinking, Mara reached out and took his hand. The moment their hands touched, the forest screamed. Not in anger. In fear. The names carved into every tree began glowing. Thousands of forgotten names. Millions. The hooks cracked. The fog thinned. The imprisoned souls started speaking. Not screaming. Remembering. They spoke their own names. One after another. The sound rolled across the forest like thunder. I am Nora. I am Owen. I am Eli. I am. I am. I am. The chorus became deafening. The forest began collapsing. It had been built from forgotten identities. Now they were returning. The old keeper looked at Mara with tears in his eyes. I remember. He smiled. My name. Before he could finish speaking it, his body dissolved into light. Not ash. Not mist. Light. The pale mask fell onto the ground, empty. The sky split open. Real sunlight poured into the forest for the first time. The dead trees burst into green leaves. The rusted hooks crumbled into dust. The generators fell silent forever. The endless fog drifted upward and disappeared into the bright morning sky. One by one, every trapped soul faded peacefully, carrying their restored memories with them. Nora smiled. Thank you. Owen nodded. We're going home. Eli laughed. A genuine laugh this time. I remember her. My sister. Then they were gone. Only Mara remained. The gate had disappeared. The forest had become an ordinary woodland. Birds sang. Wind rustled through living trees. Nothing supernatural remained except the abandoned white mask resting in the grass. Mara picked it up. It felt surprisingly warm. Inside the mask was a single sentence, carved by an unknown hand. Monsters are not born from darkness. They are born when the last person forgets your name. She gently placed the mask back on the ground and walked away. She never looked back. 6 months later, a group of hikers reported finding the ruins of an old forest no map had ever marked. They discovered rusted machinery buried beneath roots. Broken hooks half swallowed by the earth. And an abandoned journal. Every page was blank. Except the last. Written in fresh black ink were 4 names. Mara. Nora. Owen. Eli. Below them was one final sentence. As long as someone remembers, the forest can never grow again. The wind turned the page. Another line slowly wrote itself. Until someone forgets. The journal closed on its own. Somewhere deep in the quiet woods. A single, slow footstep echoed. Crunch. Then silence.